This is my first video that I have done for YouTube, and I thought that we would kick it off strong and do my most requested video, a long form tutorial on how to make sourdough bread. So we're gonna get right into it. Okay, so it is currently 1:30 p.m. We fed our starter at about 7:45, 8 o'clock this morning. So it's been 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, about 5 hours. I kept her in my office with the space heater on because it's currently winter right now. And if I just left my starter out here on the counter, it would take probably 8 to 12 hours to rise. So I've learned that finding a nice little warm and toasty spot, wrapping her up in a towel, allows her to get active so much faster. And we can tell that she is ready to go. She's doubled in size. She's busting over. Typically, when I make my sourdough, I would not use this much starter, but I am going to be making a few loaves behind the scenes today, in addition to the one that we're going to be filming. So I did make quite a lot of starter. Also, I talk about this in depth on my blog post, which I'm going to link down below, but I actually use the measurement system, like measuring cups versus a scale. I've tried to use the scale. I've tried both methods. I just find that using a cup versus a scale works a lot better for me. I mix everything with my hands, so I just have learned to like feel what it's supposed to feel like. And sourdough is very dependent on like your environment, the season that you're in, how warm it is in your house, how long it's been since you used your starter, how hungry it is. All of those factors tie into how your loaf is going to turn out. I know it sounds like a lot, but trust me, when I first was learning, I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. You just kind of pick it up and it becomes second nature. But all of those outside atmospheres, this thing is like bubbling, it's so cool, can affect the way that your loaf turns out. So I just find that using the measuring cup and then adding more water, more flour as needed has been the best method for me. And I've come out with like amazing loaves every single time. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we're gonna add half a cup of our active starter into a bowl. And I just go ahead and pour it right in. It literally doesn't have to be perfect. See, it's kind of like an overflowing half of a cup. That's totally fine. And then we're going to add that into our bowl. Okay, now we have half a cup of starter in our bowl, and now we're going to add in 2 cups of warm filtered water. So I warm my water up on the stovetop in a pot. By warm filtered water, I mean water that has been filtered, obviously, not tap water or your fridge water. This water, I have a reverse osmosis on my sink, and it depends who you talk to. Some people say that that can also kill your starter. I've been using it for months and my starter is thriving in it. So it really just depends. Prior to that, I would use like bottled spring water. So totally up to you. I heat it up on the stovetop and I want it to be roughly about, you really want it between 80 to like 96 degrees. Anything above that is too warm. Anything below that is too cold. So I just literally throw it into the pot, put it on the stovetop for like 3 minutes, and usually it's perfect temperature. We're gonna add in 3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. You can also use bread flour if you prefer. And then we're gonna do 2/3 cup of whole wheat flour. If you don't wanna use whole wheat flour, you can also use just all-purpose flour. But I have found that my loaves have like a better crumb when I use the little bit of whole wheat flour. Now I'm gonna take my spatula and basically just mix it up until mostly all of the water is absorbed, and then I will get in there with my hand and continue mixing until we have what they call a shaggy dough, which is essentially a sticky, clumpy, messy looking dough that is like sticky and well hydrated, but not like dry and clumpy. Now I'm taking a damp tea towel and we're going to cover our bowl and wrap it up just kind of tightly to keep the warmth and moisture inside. And then we're gonna set this off to ferment for 45 minutes. So set a timer so you don't forget. And I'm just gonna set this off to the side. Our 45-minute timer just went off. So now we are going to add our salt in and then do our first series of stretch and folds. Here's what our dough looks like after the 45 minutes. You can tell that it's definitely not as sticky as it was before, and it has grown just a little bit. So now we're gonna add in our salt. Do 2 teaspoons of the flaky sea salt. I'll leave the product linked down below. It's also linked on my blog post. And then to help dissolve the salt, I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of that filtered water right on top of the salt just to help break it down. Okay, so now we're going to start our first series of stretch and folds, and what that looks like is we're going to take up one side, we're going to pull it high without breaking it, and just tuck it over on the other side. And we're going to repeat this 8 times across, 8 times around. Now there are many ways that you can do this. Some people do coil folds, some people do other types of folds. I find this way to provide the best type of crumb. And what that means is we're pulling and stretching the gluten to create tension and firmness, and then that nice, like, lovely crunchy factor that we love when we bite into sourdough. So now that we did it 8 times around, we're going to cover it again with our tea towel. Now we're going to set it off aside for 30 minutes. We're back from our last 30 minutes and the dough is looking more like dough. Look at that. We're gonna do the same exact thing, another series of stretch and folds, 8 times around, cover it, and let it rest for another 30 minutes. Okay, we are on our very last series of stretch and fold. So we're gonna repeat that process one more time, stretch it up, fold it over 8 times across. I'm gonna show you over here because I think you can get a better idea of what the bread is supposed to look like. It definitely looks like dough. Remember when we started with that shaggy, messy, lumpy dough? This is much more smooth, it's risen, and it's gonna look a lot better in a few hours from now. All right, let's do it. Okay, we're gonna cover her up, and now we are going to set it aside, but not for 30 minutes. We're going to set it aside for 1 to 5 hours. Now that's a long range of time. Typically, because it's cold, it's going to bulk ferment for much longer. During the summer, usually you only need that hour to 2 hour range. But since it is colder in my house, I think the thermostat isn't even on. So it's room temperature around like 65, 66 degrees. This is probably gonna ferment for about 3 to 4 hours. We're gonna check back in on it on the 3 hour mark. What we're looking for is for the dough to double in size. That's when we know it's ready. So let's go ahead and set this off aside, and I'll see you guys back here when it's dark because right now it's 4 o'clock. All right, friends, as you can see, it is dark. It is currently 8 o'clock. So our bulk fermentation lasted 4 hours. And I know it's done because you can see the dough, it has doubled in size. It's nice and firm on top. As you can see here, when I touch it, I'm not getting any dough on my fingers. See, fingers are clean. So now what we're going to do, so with 2 floured hands, we'll take our dough out of the bowl just by grabbing both sides and pulling it up and just allowing it to come out of the bowl by itself with not too much force. There we go. And now we're going to plop it on the counter and fold it back over itself. So now we're going to fold it in half on one side and then fold it in half on the other side. So it's kind of folded like a hot dog bun. And then you're gonna take one side and you're gonna kind of pull and roll. So you want it to be like nice and tight. And we're just gonna pull this into like a nice little log. And then from here is where we're going to like roll it into a ball. So you're gonna push forward with your right hand and then pull back under. This is to create a nice smooth dough or dough on top. And we're just creating lots of tension and rolling this into a nice little ball. There's no like right or wrong amount of times to do this, just until it feels right. I mentioned before I was making a lot of sourdough on the side. So this is actually 2 loaves, and this is like a better depiction, I think, because it's in a larger quantity, but you can see that it's just like ready to be shaped. Dough's just like so fun. You can just like, I don't know, I just love it. I love it. Okay, our 20-minute timer went off, and now we're going to do what they call an envelope seal or an envelope pinch, whatever you want to call it. First things first, we're going to grab our Banton basket, which is this basket with a cloth right over it. You can get these on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive. If you don't have one of these, don't worry about it. You can use a bowl with a tea towel, but you do want it to be roughly this size because our sourdough is going to proof in here overnight, which means it's going to take shape of whatever bowl you put it in. So starting out, we're going to give this a good dust with flour because we don't want our sourdough to stick in there. Next, we're going to take a bench scraper, or you can just use your hands, but I find a bench scraper to be easier. And you're going to scoop up underneath it, and we're going to flip it back on its side. Now we're going to do what they call an envelope pinch. Basically, we're going to grab the dough from one side and you're going to wrap it over on the other side. Essentially, it's giving itself a nice little hug. You're going to do it on the other side and then on the top, and then basically just on any corner that is open. We're trying to make like a really nice and tight seal. Something like this. Then we're going to take our bench scraper, we're going to scoop it up, and we're going to plop that baby right in our little basket. And then if you want, you can pinch whatever is open. You really want this to be like nice and closed. I just kind of get in there and use my fingers and roll it up until it looks something like this. Take our tea towel, we're going to wrap it over tightly, just like we did when we were doing our stretch and folds. And we're gonna pop this baby in the fridge for about 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours, best overnight. And then in the morning, we can bake it up and we'll get to enjoy the fruits of our labor. I'll see you guys in the morning. I pulled my sourdough loaf out of the fridge. This has actually been in the fridge for a long proof for 2 days. I personally like to do 2 days because I think it adds more of a sour flavor, but you could totally do 8 to 12 hours. It's just preference for me. So this is what it should look like when you pull it out of the fridge. As you can see, it puffed up. The top has a nice texture to it. And now what we're going to do is bake our loaf. So I've laid out a piece of parchment paper here, and we're going to just dump our loaf out right in the center, and it should pull right up. Look how beautiful that looks. Now here's the fun part. You can score this however you want. If this is your first loaf, generally just a big X will do the trick, but I'm going to do just a really simple but fun design. So I'm going to dust the entire top with some all-purpose flour. Some people use other types of flour. Guys, I've always used all-purpose flour and I've never had an issue. So we're going to dust that up, and now it's time to score. As I mentioned before, if this is your first loaf, you can just make a giant X across the top, nice and deep. That way, so when your loaf bakes, it doesn't explode in a weird way and it has a direction to go. I'm going to do just something really simple, but feel free to do what you'd like. So this is going to be my deep score, and I'm going to go over it once and then go over it one more time. So this is generally where it's going to have the most rise. And then I'm just going to do some like little designs like this. Maybe just a smaller one here. I typically don't really have a plan before I start scoring. I just kind of do what comes to mind. That looks good to me. Okay, you guys, so I've actually had my Dutch oven preheating in the oven for about an hour at 475 degrees. You want your Dutch oven to be nice and preheated, so it has a really warm and toasty spot for your sourdough to go. So I'm going to pull that out of the oven. We're gonna throw our sourdough in, and we're gonna bake. The loaf is nice and smooth. So I have 2 ice cubes, and we're gonna plop it right underneath the parchment paper. One more trick, I like to put a baking sheet underneath it, under the second wrap. I'll show you. But this ensures that your crust doesn't get too crispy. It has a nice crust and it's not like hard to chew after it's baked. So we've got our baking sheet and our sourdough loaf. Now we're going to bake. Hey Ziggy, set the timer for 25 minutes.
25 minutes, starting now.
See you in 25. Okay friends, so our timer went off. So now we're going to take the lid off. We're going to turn the temperature down to 450. It was at 475 before, and we're going to continue baking it for about 15 to 20 minutes. She looks so good. Back in. Ziggy, set the timer for 15 minutes.
15 minutes, starting now.
And then we'll see if it needs the extra 5 minutes after that. Oh my gosh. Gorgeous. Just absolutely stunning. Be careful because the loaf will be very hot, but oh my gosh. So good. I'll show you guys the bottom. You can see it's like perfectly golden brown. It's not too hard. That way when we toast it and we eat it, we're not gonna have to break our jaw chewing through it. I'm really happy with how this turned out. She looks really good. Okay, so I know it's very tempting to cut into this loaf right now, but we're gonna wait 45 minutes to an hour. And reason being is that the loaf is actually still cooking as it cools. So we don't want to cut into it and have this gummy, doughy texture. We really want it to let it sit and just trust me, it'll be worth it. It looks so good. So what I like to do is I like to cut it in half, and then I like to flip one side over and then just cut it this way. I find it to be much easier to cut without ruining like the integrity of the bread. You can see just how soft it is. So good. I'm actually not even going to toast it. I'm just gonna get some grass-fed butter. I already had this left out to room temperature, and I'm just going to lather that on. There's honestly nothing better than fresh homemade sourdough and grass-fed butter. It is like so good. The crumb is perfect. You can tell because when you bite into it, it's not like crunchy, ruin the top of your mouth. It is like crispy and like almost like puffed quinoa. Baby girl is definitely happy about this. So good. Perfectly sour too. Okay, I'm not gonna just like eat this on camera. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please be sure to like and subscribe, and then leave me any comments you have down below. I'm also gonna link the blog post that I have, which is the written out step-by-step post on exactly what we went through on this video. So I really hope you find it helpful, and let me know what you guys want to see next time.